It's one of the most extraordinary moments in Britain's history. Prime Minister Boris Johnson refusing calls from his own cabinet to resign. Nine's Brett McLeod is outside the Prime Minister's residence. Brett, the Queen could be dragged into this mess.
Yeah, this is the site of one of the highest wind speeds ever recorded by man.
Arson could be the cause of a fire at the Sydney home of controversial comedian, commentator and YouTuber Friendly Geordies.
Supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies.
And to get hot, I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man.
The decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Ukraine.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Fence Sitting Podcast. I am William Brooke, one of your co-hosts, and then we also have
Tiago Armitage.
So, welcome to the podcast. We are hoping this will be a bi-weekly fortnightly discussion on politics and society and culture. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, Tiago?
Yeah, so I'll introduce the podcast first, I reckon. We just sort of thought it'd be a good idea to keep in contact while we're away. Whoever listens to it is whatever. It's just really a bit of fun. Don't take anything we say too seriously. We're going to talk about. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, that's kind of the point of. Don't take anything we say too seriously, because too many people today are taking too much too seriously. And there's obviously a massive gap in the market for two guys doing a mediocre podcast about random stuff.
Yes, of course. No one's done this before.
No one's done this before. So yes, this is us. But yeah, no, keep going.
So we'll sort of be talking mainly on politics, but we'll be going into culture, probably some science, art, that sort of thing. So if you're interested in the world, I guess, there'll be something in this podcast for you. And then we'll just be going through general happenings, what's happening in the news, what's important, what's not, try and sort through all the stuff. We will probably be setting up an email account, which people can write in with questions to ask us, and we'll use our extremely uneducated opinions to try and answer those questions as best as possible.
So I suppose with just to let the listeners know, or the viewers know, about our current situation. So I was kind of born and raised in Australia, just like Tiago, but I moved to Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland just over a month ago now. And so what Tiago was saying about us kind of keeping in touch, we've decided that this little podcast will be a way to keep ourselves interacting and talking to each other, which of course I'm sure we'd do anyway, but this forces us to do it. So anyway, we thought, because I suppose the other idea of this podcast is that we don't get too complicated and lost in political detail. So we thought we'd start off pretty light and easy for the first episode, and we'd begin by just discussing what we've been reading and watching and listening to. So, Tiago, what have you been enjoying these last few weeks?
Well, I'm not the only one who's been enjoying this. I'm sure a lot of people are very excited about this and very happy about what this means for the future of a lot of TV stuff. But I've been really, really enjoying the Last of Us series on HBO. So if I don't know if you know, Will, but The Last of Us is a video game originally. We all know how video game adaptations go. But
the Zelda film was brilliant.
The TV show is some of the best TV I think I've ever seen. There's a few episodes in particular that could stand themselves as like amazing pieces of film, and it's very exciting to see what they're going to do next. So I think there's one more episode coming out next week, And yeah, I'm really happy about it. It's a property that I really enjoyed playing through, and I'm really enjoying watching now. So it's good.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Is it so it's on HBO?
Yeah.
And how many episodes?
I think 7. I'm not 100% sure, but I think 7.
Okay.
It's
That's cool.
it's
and it's like a,
it's post-apocalyptic zombie, and then
yeah.
I know like that sounds, we've done that, but it's not really about that. Like there's episodes where no zombies are in it. It's the big I've been listening to a podcast with the creators talking about it, and what they're saying is it's actually a big love story, really, not like romantic love story, and it's an exploration of where love can take us. So whether that be to a good or happy place, or doing heinous violent crimes or whatever that may be. And then every episode it's sort of a study of a different kind of sort of type of love, I guess, and how tragic that can be or how wonderful that can be.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's pretty deep. Is there like a father-son relationship kind of thing, or someone searching, or is that
the thesis of the story, I guess you'd say, is there's a man, he loses his daughter before the world sort of ends, and then he's just this like gruff survivor guy, and then he meets this young girl who, I won't spoil it, but he has to take across the country, and it's sort of about the development of their relationship and others around them, and lots of interesting characters along the way. So yeah.
There you go. I'll definitely check that out. It's very interesting, the way video games are evolving. Like the idea. I don't know. I feel like one thing the internet has done, which is I absolutely love, is like how you can get really tight-knit groups of people kind of funneling and developing really specific things, like specific games, specific movies, and then like those types of games and those types of movies and those types of kind of things. Because with like traditional video games back in the day, it's just like Pong. It's like you have, it's just a simple game which you have an aim and everything. But the kind of evolution of, I don't know, would you call it like indie games? That's a thing, isn't it? Indie games. Yeah. Indie games with like a narrative storyline, like which can then transfigure into a film. A game which I found just kind of purely by chance. I don't think I've talked to you about it before, actually. It's called Coffee Talk. And it's like it's a very narrative, it's like almost a fully narrative driven, I suppose, indie game. But I mean, the art behind it is quite beautiful as well. And you're more or less yourself in this like Seattle coffee shop in the future. So it's kind of like it's like sci-fi kind of mixed with fantasy in the future. So there's like orcs and there's like werewolves, but then there's like vampires, and then there's just straight up like spacemen, and they come into your coffee shop and you kind of have a conversation with them, and then they ask you for your coffee and you make the coffee, and the story grows and grows and grows and grows. And I've been playing it like on and off for, I don't know, I think I started in like end of year 10 or something, so like 3 years or 4 years now, and because you can come back to it, and it's just like a switch off, put on the headphones, listen to the beautiful soundtrack, and just enjoy kind of thing. So that I'm really interested to see where the evolution of games goes. And again, that is one reason why I do love the internet and the technology in creating those kind of things. And I think that there's even a second Coffee Talk coming out. So yeah, I don't know, maybe you could check that out.
Yeah, that sounds good. Before you get on to, there's one last thing I'd like to say. In terms of the video game thing, I can't remember who said it, but it's such a good point that people often disregard games as forms of art. But what I see in a lot of, especially newer titles and more story-driven stuff, it's a culmination of a lot of different forms of art, whether that be film, visual art, animation, music, even just narratives. It can be quite extraordinary what you can achieve in a good game.
especially something like Lego Star Wars: The Complete Saga. That's that is the form,
The
highest peak of the Western
pinnacle
canon.
of
Yeah. Anyway, so I ended up watching a film. So I watched The Dig on Netflix. Have you heard of The Dig before?
I have not.
No. So The Dig is it's like a period drama set in South England just before the Second World War. And it follows this team as they discover these archaeological remains of Anglo-Saxon burial ships. And Ralph Fiennes plays this quite funny. His character's called Basil Brown, and he's like this older kind of English like amateur excavator for archaeology. And so there's like this wealthy English kind of lady, and she calls him in and she's like, I have mounds in my lands, go dig them up and see what happens. And he starts digging, and they don't think there's going to be much. And anyway, they start finding this like archaeological Anglo-Saxon ship, and it's like this massive find in 1939. And then the local museum gets called in, and then like the higher up overall British Museum calls him. And like my worry was like, oh, it's going to be like the small man Basil Brown versus like the establishment of the overarching British Museum, which they played with a little bit, and I was like, oh, this might be a little bit boring, but or predictable. But the way they did the film, it kind of flowed, like the narrative flowed, so that conflict never really occurred, and it was more like there was a little bit of conflict, but they united quite quickly on, and then it was more you were just tracking the lives and experiences of the characters. And then Basil Brown's importance kind of diminished, and not in a way which kind of made the narrative less interesting, but allowed other people to flourish. And it was also just like a really beautiful movie. So it was directed by this guy called Simon Stone, who's actually Australian. Funny enough, that really quite surprised me. He's like this young Australian guy who's like just directing this beautiful kind of artistic English film. But like the shots of just the countryside, and Basil kind of like cycling through these lanes and the mounds and everything, and then there's kind of this underlying turbulence of the Second World War just around the corner. So every now and then you'll have like a flight of Spitfires flying over, and it's really quite good. And the other thing is it's based off a true story.
I was going to ask that,
which is quite interesting. Well, yeah.
How close does it follow?
No, that was
for the true story.
Pretty closely. I did some research. It's my favorite character was made up, which seems to be a reoccurring theme. But yeah, there was this guy called Rory Lomax, and the wealthy kind of aristocratic lady is like, oh, Basil, you need some help there. I'll call my amateur excavator cousin, because everyone's an amateur excavator. Rory Lomax, he'll be up on his motorbike. And so this kind of like a dapper, blue eyes, blonde hair guy blasts up on his like motorbike and then gets off, and he's like, I'm here to help the excavation. Here's this little camera and everything. But anyway, he's a very interesting character. And I even thought when he first appeared, I was like, damn, he would make a really good Lawrence of Arabia, because he looked more like Lawrence of Arabia than Lawrence of Arabia looked like. Which is another. There's like a few things in my head which I feel like are ripe for a modern remake. And I feel like there could be quite a good modern kind of. I feel like you could make a good miniseries or TV show out of Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, now with the amount of money that they put into like those like a Chernobyl-esque thing, or
yeah. With the rise of the miniseries, which seems to be occurring. But anyway. But yeah, so that's what I've been watching.
Okay, I'll check that out probably.
Yeah. So should we move on to a little bit of politics, perhaps?
What's our first topic? I'm just going to have a look. The North Island Protocol that you were talking about this morning. I haven't looked much into this, so you'll be taking the reign on this one.
Yeah, don't worry. So, also, just to the viewers, I suppose mostly what we'll be focusing on politically will be like weird blend of Australian British domestic stuff, and then every now and then kind of flittering off into the world. So it's been quite an interesting few weeks in British politics, because we just had the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, do like a surprise resignation not that long ago. So that was quite big, but we'll leave that for another episode. The big kind of thing in British politics over about the last like 36 hours, because it kind of came out of nowhere, was this thing called the Windsor Framework. So pretty much what has happened is ever since Brexit, Northern Ireland has been in a state of turmoil. It actually got to the point where the Northern Irish government has collapsed. And so Northern Ireland has been without government for more than a year. The only way it's actually running is by direct rule from London, which no one really talks about.
I was not aware of that. No, I feel like that's something that should come up more.
Yeah, it would be like the state government of Western Australia just not operating for like a year.
And just everything coming through Canberra.
Yeah, and everything coming through Canberra. It's pretty mental, to be honest. And obviously Northern Ireland is one of like fundamental nations of the United Kingdom. So it's weird. But so the problem, the main problem is, right, ever since Brexit, Northern Ireland has a border, obviously, with the Republic of Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland is still within the EU. So there's this hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and it's like, well, then what's a hard border? Because it's a weird word. So hard border is where if you have goods going across it, then they have to be checked, they have to be signed off on, you have to have documents and everything. Or if you're a person and you're immigrating across the border, then you have to show your passport and go through strenuous checks there. And it bogs down and divides the two states on either side of that border, which is annoying, but usually can work all right. But the thing with Ireland is it's quite controversial, because with the history of Northern Ireland, there are some within the north of Ireland which want to stay unified, and then there are with the rest of Ireland, and then who are the Republicans. And then there are some who want to stay unified with the United Kingdom, who are the Unionists. And so Tony Blair, back in the day, came up with this thing called the Good Friday Agreement, which meant that there would be the Northern Irish government would only function if there was a union between the main Republican Party and the main Unionist Party, to kind of allow both sides to talk to each other. And because Britain was back then in the EU, it meant that there was no hard border and people could pass in and out. And you felt like, if you were in Northern Ireland, that you were part of the United Kingdom, and you also felt like you were part of the Republic of Ireland. Anyway, Brexit happens, that split happens, and suddenly there's that hard border, and everyone in Northern Ireland who feels more Irish than British is suddenly divided from the rest of Ireland, which isn't great. So Theresa May kind of came in with all of her ideas and plans, and they were all obliterated because Conservatives are annoying sometimes. And then you had Boris Johnson come around, and he kind of came up with this thing called the Northern Irish Protocol, which more or less kept Northern Ireland within the European Union trade-wise, and then separated it from the rest of Britain. And then kind of drew the border, like this hard border in the ocean, in the Irish Sea. So any goods coming from Britain to Northern Ireland had to be checked, because it would then go into the EU. This more or less.
That sounds good, though. I'm imagining there's a big but coming, isn't there?
but the thing is, so that sounds kind of good. But then the thing is, it divides Northern Ireland from the rest of Britain and puts it kind of under the rule of the European Union. More or less like splitting up the UK into two different trade blocks, when the UK should be one kind of trade block. So not to get, I mean, it's quite a finicky issue, but so you've got all that happening with Northern Ireland. And then Boris was like, but we'll protect the Northern Irish kind of sovereignty by saying that if the EU puts any laws onto Northern Ireland which we disagree with, then we will break international law and veto them. Which the EU was like, well, that's literally illegal. And you had this bizarre moment in the House of Commons where you had like literally government ministers saying, yeah, we've devised this treaty to make it legal, to allow us to break international law, which is ridiculous. Anyway, long story short, Rishi Sunak comes along, the new British Prime Minister, and he has kind of blown everyone away, more or less, by finally finding this compromise. So his idea is that goods coming from Britain into Northern Ireland, and which are staying in Northern Ireland, go through this thing called the Green Lane, and then goods coming from Britain into Northern Ireland, but which will continue on to the Republic of Ireland, go through this thing called a Red Lane. So everything in the Green Lane doesn't need any checks, doesn't need any regulations, no bureaucracy. Everything going through the Red Lane does. And that way you can divide those two kind of things, which means that things flow freely into Northern Ireland, and then things also flow into the Republic of Ireland without dividing them, which is very important. And there's this other side of the agreement called the Stormont Block, because the Northern Irish Parliament is called Stormont, and it's a very lovely looking building. It's quite nice. Which is a shame it hasn't been used for a year. But so this Stormont Block means that because the EU still has some control over what happens within Northern Ireland, the Stormont Block more or less says, right, if the Northern Irish Assembly thinks that there's something which is too fundamental and too infringing on their rights, then there's this mechanism vote that they can have. And if the UK government then approves it, they can then object to the EU putting those laws onto Northern Ireland. So there was a combination of those two things, and overall Rishi Sunak has kind of pulled through this good kind of medium compromising deal, which no one has been able to do since Brexit, and which is back in 2016, and he's kind of pulled it out. He's pulled it out of like nowhere, and so people are kind of thinking that, well, maybe this is like the turnaround moment for his government, because obviously the Conservatives here in Britain aren't doing too well in the polls. But yeah.
So do you reckon this will have a big impact on how far out's the election?
The election's about it's about a year and a half.
Right. So do you reckon this will have a substantial impact, or do you reckon
it will? It will. I think it will. If it because hopefully, because it hasn't actually he's just presented the deal and he's got the EU to agree to it. It hasn't actually passed the House of Commons yet. So he has to put it to the House of Commons, which he did. He last night he kind of presented it. And Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, fully supported it. So he's got the support of the Labour Party. He's got hopefully most of the support of his own party. There's kind of this there's this group within the Conservatives called the ERG, which is the European Research Group, and they're very Eurosceptic and anti the EU, and their kind of spokesman got up when Sunak presented it, and instead of kind of destroying him and saying it's a terrible deal, he said that he'd consider it and go away and read the deal and everything. And then the Democratic Unionist Party, which is the Northern Irish Party, which is unionist, said that they would consider the deal as well. So he's kind of like treading on eggshells, but if he succeeds and treads all the way, it's going to be a massive accomplishment for him. And yeah, I mean, it's made me like him a lot more. It's a very decent thing to solve within Britain, because it's just been that kind of thorn in the British political side for a while. So it's been pretty crazy.
So have they just sort of been ignoring the issue for well, I guess the Conservatives have been in a bit of turmoil recently. They've probably been sorting out their own stuff, and I guess now that things have settled down, they're actually able to make some solid policy decisions. And
more or less. I mean, Boris, so it's called the Windsor Framework now, but before it was like that Northern Ireland Protocol is what Boris brought in, and that the whole idea of the Northern Ireland Protocol was just to kind of put some plaster on it and like kick it down the road.
Yeah.
And Rishi Sunak finally kind of walked down the road and picked it up and said, "Well, this is terrible. We need to sort this out." Yeah. The other cool thing, which I mean, as a monarchist, I quite like, is that it's called the Windsor Framework because it was actually like negotiated within the Windsor Castle. And Ursula von der Leyen, who's the European president, she came over and she like met the king and they had tea and lots of fun. But anyway, so that's it's been pretty hectic over here. But that's like, I don't know, in all of the cost of living in Ukraine and yada yada, it's something positive and something
with bipartisan support and
bipartisan support, and fingers crossed that then the Northern Irish government will accept it and will be able to come back into their alliance and get the government up and going again. Because I mean, it's crazy how Northern Ireland has just been without government for so long. But yeah. Anyway, so there you go. That's the
Your monarchist comment actually reminded me. We were going to, before we get into talking about Jimmy, we were going to talk about our political standings off the top of the episode. But we got right into things. Would you like to go first? Or
well, I've just been talking for a while, so you go.
Well, I guess this also comes into the name of the podcast, Fence Sitters, which we haven't discussed.
We should probably explain that, shouldn't we? Yeah.
Will and I tend to go back and forth on a lot of issues, especially we both vaguely have our sides of politics that we stand with, especially on the more, when we're actually talking about world politics in terms of policy and stuff like that. But in terms of ideology, I think we're both a little bit more confused, which it makes sense. We're young guys in the age of the internet where we're constantly bombarded with different political theory and why this is good and why this is bad and all that. But for myself, I would say I'm definitely, more on that left, Labour, commie scum.
Centre, moderate, centre left.
But that is subject to change, and I think the reasons why I'm drawn to it, especially living in a country like Australia, is a lot of my life where I've been politically engaged, I have watched our Liberal Party constantly fail, which has been, it's tiring. So obviously I'm drawn to the idea of a Labour government, which we have just gotten in, and they seem to be doing a lot better of a job so far. But yeah, as I said, that's why we're called the Fence Sitting Podcast. We're going to change our minds on a lot of things. So something that we say today, we may completely disagree on the next podcast.
Exactly. We sit on the fence, which can be very annoying sometimes, but at least we're not, making lots of very large and fundamental claims without really putting in the effort to do the research or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather sit on the fence than say large things and not mean them properly. So I guess with myself, Tiago, is a chief executive of the Labour unions back in Australia, and have you joined the Labour Party yet? By the way, did you?
No, I'm planning on, but I've just been busy at the moment. But I'll look into it more when I get more time. When you're too busy to join the Labour Party. I want to explain that's less about becoming like a staunch representative for a group, and more about being engaged in more political discussion. That's not going to bore my girlfriend or my friends. So
there you go. Exactly. So yeah, with myself, I guess just an immediate. I'm a member of the Conservative Party. Technically, I'm a member of the Scottish Conservative Party, which is like a nice little spin-off. We're actually called the Scottish Conservatives and Unionists, and we have our own little logo and everything. It's pretty cute. But anyway, so yeah, I'm a conservative. So I'm like, where Tiago's pretty much moderate left, center left. I'm kind of moderate right, center right. So I'm quite my love of and interest in politics comes from my love of history and philosophy. So I'm a very kind of philosophical conservative. So I'm all about kind of the less rational, more emotional kind of side of things. So like it's kind of hard to explain, but it's more like a love of the nation and love of history and culture and art and all of those things which kind of come together to form the national conscience. I kind of revel in all of that. So you know, and the thing which goes with that is slow, kind of progressive, organic change over years and years and years and years. And I believe that society should be built from the grassroots up, rather than perhaps the more radical left idea of the government kind of building society from the top down. So it's a very kind of wishy-washy, less economic, more kind of philosophical kind of idea, I guess. So yeah, so when it comes to like specific things and specific problems, I suppose I'm more progressive than the usual kind of conservative. Yeah, I don't know. So like, yeah, slow organic change, a love of history, tradition, a belief in institutions like the monarchy and parliament and representative government. I think a constitutional monarchy is the best kind of political system we have and we ever are going to get. And a big belief in compromise as well. I'm very wary of ideologies which present all of the fixes to our problems, because life is far too complicated to go with that. And part of that kind of conservative ideology is that I'm fully open to being completely wrong myself, because it's like, what do we know?
I would say we're both in that. If we're saying something completely wrong, feel free to correct us in an email or in the comment sections or whatever. We are not going to attack you. We have our opinions, and it's interesting you say your love of politics comes from history and philosophy, where I'd say mine comes from philosophy and psychology. Which is interesting, and I guess it would speak to a little bit of where we would sit on that political spectrum if we were to place ourselves on it.
Yeah, maybe history brings you to the right and psychology brings you to the left.
Well, I guess it's that like people focused, which you could say, and then
no, that's very good. Yeah, people focused, that idea of social justice and bringing people up, rather than the more history, love of nation focused, which would bring you more to the right. Yeah, no, it's good. It's fascinating how different things interact with where you sit on the political spectrum. Yeah, it's very odd. But maybe we should probably touch on that in another episode.
We should. We'll get much deeper into that.
Yeah, because there's a lot in that little nugget there. Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of, that's what annoys me. It's like people these days is like, yes, the left is holy and all enshrined, and the people on the right are literally evil. They are out to destroy the world. It's like, no, people genuinely have different views of how the world works and runs, and it's a anyway. So we want to move on to.
Shall we talk about Jim Chalmers? Now, this is very specific thing to talk about in the first episode. For those of you who don't know, Jim Chalmers is our treasurer in Australia. He's a member of the Labor government here. If you don't know what the treasurer is, what would you say? The economic manager, designs the budget, that sort of thing.
And runs the economy.
He is landed
second to the prime minister, more or less.
He's landed himself into a bit of hot water in the past few weeks. Has it been now?
He has. Yeah, I guess so.
He wrote an essay I can't remember the publication that he wrote it for.
The Monthly.
The Monthly, that's right.
Monthly,
I believe it's called the Capitalism After the Crisis. And I've got some thoughts on it, but I'd perhaps like to hear your thoughts first of all. Have you
My
read the essay?
Well, I have not read the essay because I only found it last night.
Well, we should explain
Um,
this as well. We thought that the
yes,
outrage was over the budget until
yes,
recently, where we worked out it was actually over this essay. So we've both done some
yeah.
emergency research into
So Tiago,
this.
so I sent Tiago off to research the budget, and then I was researching this essay, and it's all a bit of a disaster. But we'll
So
talk about it
we'll
anyway.
talk about the budget anyway, since I've got
Yeah.
quite a few notes on it.
Yeah. But yeah, so this essay, Capitalism After the Crisis, it's quite interesting because, I mean, I get quite bored when you have your average politician who wears a suit and tie and walks in and out of Parliament every day and doesn't really give too many more thoughts to the job. But this Jim Chalmers guy went away on his summer holiday and penned this 6,000-word kind of philosophical, semi-artistic essay about how he's going to kind of begin the new or reinstate this new kind of capitalism to tackle the problems which our world faces.
I think
and
it's important to note, just before you go on there, Will, this is not policy. This is not set in stone.
No, it's not.
This is an essay
It's
that
not
he's
at all.
written in his
This is an
own
essay.
time. He was not being
his own
paid to
time.
write it.
No.
But
This is not government sanctioned at all.
no, this is not a reflection on the Labor government of Australia. But it could be an indicator of
where
the
he's going.
future of what a possible Labor government in a few more terms could do.
Could do.
You can do now.
No, it's very interesting because you don't usually get politicians doing this kind of thing, so it's really quite interesting. But anyway, Capitalism After the Crisis, artistic, contemplative, philosophical essay about where capitalism is in the world. And I mean, it was so great. He starts off with a quote from an ancient Greek philosopher. Were you aware of that?
Yes, I did end up reading it instead of studying today. So
Okay, there you go. So he starts this essay with, and I am going to read the quote here. So, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. How deep is that? And then he's like, anyway, the local economic stimulation package. So that quote is from Heraclitus, who was a pre-Socratic philosopher, for those nerds out there. Anyway, the idea is behind this essay, or the 6,000 words, is that the world is in a state of crisis. We have kind of going back to the GFC back in 2008, and now we have Ukraine and Russia, and we've got the rise of China, and we've got the cost of living, and we've just come out of COVID, and inflation's skyrocketing, all of these things going on. And Jim Chalmers has gone, well, we need a new deal. We need a new idea. We need to save capitalism, and we need to make capitalism with a conscience, which is a very kind of classic democratic socialist kind of left view, I guess, which is what he is. So more power to him. But his whole essay is kind of humanizing and altering capitalism in a state of crisis. And it seems it's something of a more philosophical kind of pondering essay. But from what I could understand of it, is his idea is if you have, it's like state intervention to invest into sectors of the economy which will kind of virtuously benefit specific people groups within society, which is a very kind of jargonistic way of putting it. But it's like, instead of the markets kind of running free and wild and just doing their own thing and everyone aiming completely at profit, it's the government kind of, well, I suppose, it is the government intervening within the markets to kind of urge them into a way which will allow the kind of overall people to benefit from the way these markets are going and fluctuating.
Well, I essentially read it as he's wanting to bring the public sector and the private sector closer together than they are.
Closer together, yeah.
It's not radical, but we'll get into that more in a second.
No, not really. No, it's not that radical at all. So Yeah, it's just that closer connection between the private and the public sector. And it's interesting. And another thing on this is I googled it I put it into YouTube, this essay.
I
and
did
there
that
was
too.
like
Yes.
yeah. So there was like one thing from the ABC, and then the rest was just Sky News, like just obliterating. And I was like, oh my god, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well,
so
I've
if you
I would like to address that. Do you have more that you wanted to say on that?
Well, yeah. Do you want to talk about you talk about Sky News and News Corp? Old Murdoch.
We'll get into the Murdoch and all that in another episode. I'm sure it'll come up again. But this is a classic move of taking something that someone has done in politics that's not overly important. It's kind of cool. No. It's neat.
It's kind of cool.
But blowing it out of the water. We need to really take a step back and stop focusing so much on this and more on policy when we're critiquing a party, right? So you can't come out and say things like the Sky News was saying, like, oh, what have I got in here? Yeah, so focusing far more on the contents of an essay than they did on their reporting of last year's budget, which I'm sure we'll get into, was a very sensible budget, right? And I believe this essay is pretty sensible, but obviously, just Sky News, Fox News types, they're labeling it as very communist, very Marxist sort of idea. And I've just written here, Chalmers wants to bring public and private sector closest. I'm shocked. This is a stance Labour has never taken. This is basically communism. It's not going to change. It's not going to change life for most people. Just a few CEOs.
Yeah.
I don't know what you have to say about that. But,
no, it's pretty horrible. And this is where I split quite heavily from people on the right. Is the media culture, especially in Australia, is just horrendous when it comes to stuff like this. Because Sky News is obviously, at least within Australia, has a very vested kind of conservative right-wing look on things. So it was, it's just like a deep, disheartening, kind of depressive way of reporting on things which don't need to be blown to that proportion to distract from what really needs to be reported on, which is perhaps actually going quite well and in Labour's favour. So it was annoying and frustrating, and to be honest, quite comical.
Yes,
but anyway,
I did get quite a chuckle out of it.
I was like, and even Jim Chalmers in interviews, he's like, guys, calm down. It's just an essay.
He wrote it after I put my kids to bed, and then I sat up and had a glass of wine and wrote this essay.
And then the Sky News, like, bloody neo-Marxist communist radical. I don't know. I have mixed feelings overall on the ideas within it.
Mm-hmm.
I read an article in The Spectator, and I have this this quote from it. So it's kind of, so I think what the idea he's kind of getting at is, apparently it's already it's called environmental, social and governance model, which is this idea of the government managing the capital kind of investment flow to different sectors, as I was saying, to bring the public and private together. And this quote kind of goes, so ESG, environmental, social, and governance model, allocates capital according to values superimposed on markets, instead of values arising organically from within the communities serviced by those markets. So, like, as the natural conservative within me, economically, I am actually a little bit wary of I'd want to see the specifics of how Jim Chalmers is planning to do it, and what kind of technical things he's going to put in place to do it. But the fundamental thing is, as a conservative, I prefer like the markets to be stimulated from the bottom up, from the people buying into those markets, rather than kind of directed from the top down, from a government, more state-run kind of thing. But then, obviously, you can make the argument that the problem is that if you go bottom up, then you've got a small number of elite people who control that kind of bottom-up process, with the majority of people in the bottom kind of not benefiting at all. So it's quite, I don't know, it's difficult. But I worry. I mean, I'd want to see the specifics of how it would run, but I do worry that too much government control doesn't always benefit the economy to the greatest extent. But perhaps in this time of crisis, as he's calling it, more government control is needed over the economy. I mean, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a very valid point, what you're putting forward. In terms of seeing what steps he would do to put this in place, he has based this essay on a Labour plan from post 2008. So
Okay.
that got thrown out basically.
Is this the Clean Energy Finance Corporation?
I'm not entirely sure.
Not sure, okay.
As we've said, we worked this out today, but maybe if we could come back to this in another episode. If we looked into that plan, maybe it would give us a clue onto sort of what the basis of where he wants to go and how he wants to conduct this, if he even does conduct it. I mean, it's, as we said, it's just an essay at this point.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It is interesting. The kind of different economic theories in regards to how things should go forwards in the world. But anyway, do you want to talk a little bit about his proper budget then?
Okay. Well, I won't go into too much detail, but watching the speech for the budget, he says the words sensible and responsible about 18 times. He really wants to get the point across. Also, not him, it was actually Anthony Albanese that announced it, but I can't remember actually. But he does, sensible and responsible are the themes that keep coming up, and I think that's a very smart move for the Labour Party at the moment. If you've been following Australian politics at all, you knew how they probably won the election and how they're sort of taking things into the future, why there's probably this Jim Chalmers essay thing was such a big thing to report on, is they're keeping quiet, they're not saying much, they're doing little steps, make a big difference, and just sort of taking a very John Howard sensible sort of approach to things. But like what I've seen in this budget is great, honestly. I'm really happy with it. We've got things like more access to healthcare, whatever you think about that. I'm happy about that. Longer paid parental relief. So between the two parents, there can be 6 months of, if you're eligible, if you earn over a certain amount, it doesn't always happen, but you get 6 months of paid off time at work. Better access to health, to childcare, so mothers and dads could get back to work. This is all sort of stuff he mentioned to help with the cost of living, those sort of things, to get people back onto their feet. There's subsidies for TAFE courses because we have a skill shortage in this country, and we know there's two ways you can deal with a skills shortage. You can bring skill in, or you can foster your own skill, and that's what these funded TAFE courses are. There's been taxes taken off electric cars, electric charging, and hydrogen refueling, which is interesting. We'll get more into the weeds about things like climate change in another episode, but to me, this is a positive thing. I have written a note here that's I want to talk about at some point the sustainability of electric cars themselves. I was having a discussion with my girlfriend about this, and we're talking about maybe the manufacturing of electric cars is just as bad as emissions. But as I said, we'll get into that. And then also he's got here, they're building 30,000 more social housing, which is
Okay.
Labor's response to the housing crisis, which we'll also get into more, which means there'll be houses built by the government rather than property developers. This is all sounding very communist, as I'm saying, but the idea is there'll be more affordable houses for people to actually live in and not just rent out. So yeah, besides that, a little bit of money towards uni, not a huge amount, and a little bit more money to rural schools. But those were the sort of the main points of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So
yeah,
a sensible, no nonsense budget.
yes, it's the aim of it is it's a short term fix for the cost of living, with those development of skills for the long term, right? So we will have more people in the workforce, that we don't have to have as much immigration, and hopefully be able to fund ourselves a bit more until we're out of this crisis.
Yeah. No, okay. Very good. I mean, there's a pattern within democracies of center-right parties kind of who are usually looked on as economically competent actually stuffing stuff up, and then center-left parties going, we will be really, really sensible, and we will try to be as economically competent as we possibly can, and then maybe if we do like half of that, will you vote for us? And then they get in, and then they follow. So there's a bit of a thing, which is kind of, I mean,
The other thing I just wanted to say before we move on, such comical timing today. Jim Chalmers, who we were just talking about, announced tax cut reforms, which, when people are blurting at you and telling you that you're a communist, is quite a bold move. It's not. So in Australia, I don't know how it works in the UK, but we have super accounts. So a certain percentage of your pay automatically gets saved into a super account, and that's your fund, as well as what's it called? As a pension once you retire. That account is taxed. There's different tax brackets. Obviously, lower people who've got lower amounts saved in those super funds don't get taxed as much. People with higher. So up until 2025, a super fund with $3 million or above, which is insane. To have in a super fund, that's absolute insanity. That's not like bank balance. If that's money that you've just put away automatically throughout your career. Will be taxed now from 15% to 30%, which is a big jump. I just thought it was funny and something to bring up after all this lashback after his essay, and then to do something like this is a bold move, or to announce something like this is a bold move. But yeah.
So he's taxing them more, is he?
He's taxing them more. The excuse that they've given, reason, whatever you want to call it, is that they have inherited so much debt from their last government that they need to make up for it somehow, and this is the most ethical way they can think of doing it.
I don't know. It would be interesting to look at the statistics of how many people have over $3 million in their superannuation.
I've got them. It's 88,000 people. So
8,000.
That's the population of Australia is around what? 26
million?
23, I don't know.
23? I don't know, yeah.
And I think that's affecting around 80,000, which isn't huge, obviously. It's pretty small, but it's still a decent amount of people. But then you ask yourself the question, people that are earning enough to have $3 million in their super account, do they need that $3 million once they retire?
Yeah.
So,
but I suppose the comeback to that is like, where do you draw the line when taxing the rich is like actually halting the rich from being entrepreneurial? Which I don't know, that's just playing devil's advocate. But as I will, But I don't know. What do you think about inheritance tax?
I don't have an opinion.
Bit of a opinion on inheritance tax. No, I don't know. I've always been fascinated by inheritance tax.
That is interesting, actually. I've never thought about it,
because,
but you know,
it's because there's a lot more ethics and morals in regards to inheritance tax. And as with my kind of brand of conservativeness, like, I believe a lot in passing down through the family what
of course, yeah.
one has kind of So it's for the government, for like someone to die, which in itself is a pretty sad thing, and then for like that to be passed down and the government to like swipe in and be like, we'll have some of that, thanks. It's kind of like, I don't know, it just doesn't sit with me very well. But then the others, I don't know. It's inheritance tax is fun. Maybe we can leave that to another episode.
I just wanted to say again, don't look at tax. I've had to realize a lot of people look at tax as the money is going into the politicians' pockets.
Which it's not.
It's not. It's rarely ever will they get a pay rise because of the tax. You getting taxed more. It's going into things that we need.
We had a pay rise for our MPs over here not long ago, actually.
Disregard that.
Disregard that.
That would be probably in line with inflation, though, wouldn't it? That would be the justification. But
anyway,
I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah.
We're starting to run out of time. Is it okay if I talk on the February thing?
Yes, of course. Go for it. Sorry. Yeah.
So, over the last month, for those of you who don't know, I mean, most people watching this probably follow us on some form of social media. I have been doing a thing called Surf February, which is essentially you go out surfing every day, rain, hail, or shine, which it usually is shining here in February, luckily. And
did you ever get any rain?
In Denmark, I think I did. I got a little bit there, but and you take a photo to prove that you've gone surfing, and you upload it to your social media. And the idea is it's like a marathon essentially. You hope like a fun run. You hope essentially that people will donate enough money. And they did. The money goes towards the Lifehouse Cancer Research Centre, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's located in New South Wales. Do research into diagnostic measures for cancers, potential cures for cancers, treatments for cancers, just all that sort of stuff. They do really good work. And I had a goal of raising $500. And as of today, we have raised $795. So that is huge. I just want to thank everyone. It's a big deal. You donated some money, Will. You were the top donator, actually.
Do I get a medal?
I have a hat. I'll send. Well, I didn't donate to that. I did donate to someone else. I will put that out there, but I did not donate to myself. But yeah, it's been awesome. It's been really good. It's also been really good, and we'll get into this more in later episodes as well, because I love talking about exercising and mental health and all that stuff. Having that force to go and exercise, go and be a part of nature, go spend time with your friends every single day has just been amazing, and I feel so much happier from it. And I want to try and keep it up for as long as I can. So if we didn't raise this wonderful amount for charity, it would just be good for me. So
yeah, you're a more healthy person. So you've been surfing every single day for the last
every day, yes, including my girlfriend and I went to Denmark, and every day there I was, including the day that my car broke down. Got out to the water 10 minutes before the sunset.
Oh wow!
I managed to get one in still, so
that's good. That's dedication.
Yeah. So yeah,
there you go.
I don't know if
donations
will be closed from today. I'm not sure what day this is probably Wednesday or Thursday. But it will be happening again next year. We'll keep you posted on this podcast, all my social media, and hopefully we can raise even more next year. So that's really exciting.
There you go. That's very good. Congratulations. Thank you. That's very impressive. Yeah.
Okay, shall we wrap things up?
Shall we wrap it there? Yes. Well, if you've made it this far, probably go have a break. But no, thank you very much for listening. This is just, we'll see where this goes.
Yeah. We'll play around with different formatting. As of now, this is going to be on YouTube and SoundCloud. We'll look into other things. I know those aren't the two most convenient platforms to be on, but they are two free platforms. Any help that you guys, if anyone knows anything about how to use Spotify or anything like that, please let me know, because it's been quite frustrating trying to work that out. Huge thanks to Katie for doing our art.
Yes, no, that was. Thank you very much for that. That's really quite good. It looks very professional.
I'll put in the description of the video, I'll put a link to her Instagram and Facebook for her art stuff, if you want to go have a look, if you like what you see. We have an email, let me get it up, that you can very exciting.
Oh, you've made one?
I have. It's linked to the YouTube account. So it's fence.sitters@gmail.com. I'll put a link for that in the description as well.
There you go.
Share this around, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, email in to that email. Do you want to repeat that email to you?
fence.sitters@gmail.com.
Yeah, very good. So send us in your questions. We'll see if we can answer them. If what you liked, what you disliked, if
please let
I
us
ramble
know.
too much on Northern Ireland Protocol. But yeah.
And next week, I would like to give a little preview to keep everyone interested. We are going to be talking about AI. Now, this is a big one.
Ooh, spooky.
We'll also be getting into the big stuff that's happening in Scottish politics, and maybe touch on some Russia and Ukraine stuff. So if you're interested in that, tune in next week. Everything's subject to change, by the way. But
everything,
if you're interested in that, tune in. Hopefully we'll get some guests on at some point. That would be quite fun. But yeah.
If you want to be a guest, and you have an electronic device, who knows? I mean, we have a very low bar. So
yeah, you feel you have something interesting to say, just let us know.
Just let us know. Alrighty. Well, that's probably us done then.
Okay. Thank you so
very
much
much for listening.
See ya next week.